Hello and welcome to BharatShakti.in. I am Nitin Gokhale and with me is General Bipin Rawat, the first Chief of Defence Staff of India, who is going to speak to us about the progress that is being made on jointness, integration and of course implementation of Make in India projects that the government is now very keen to do to optimize resources. General Rawat, thank you very much for your time and welcome to this program.
Thank you.
I want to start with the recent announcement that the finance minister did. Of course, she did the announcement, but it's all of government approach, I guess. Can you tell us how are you looking at implementing those defense reforms?
Well, Nitin, the time has now come to look at transformation in a very different way. And to begin with, I would like to quote and refer to one particular book which I have read over the past couple of days. It is titled From Leapfrogging to Pole Vaulting. It's a book by Raghu Maselkar and Ravi Pandit.
That's right.
And he talks of creating the magic of radical yet sustainable transformation. So we have to now look at change. It is not going to be business as usual. The fact that the Department of Military Affairs has been created in the DoD in itself a transformation, is in itself a transformation. So whatever announcements have been made, these are basically focusing at Make in India initiatives, how the industry can deliver.
Right.
We made some headway. It's not that this is something new. But as I said, the time has come from leapfrogging to pole vaulting. We have to move faster. The industry is capable. They are showing some very positive indications. You would have noticed that as far as manufacture of artillery guns are concerned, some special kinds of ammunition, some night vision devices, personal protective clothing, as far as bulletproof jackets and helmets are concerned. We made good progress.
Right.
And I think there is a lot more that we can do. Here I would like to once again refer to another book called, which has been titled Freedom's Forge. It's a book by Arthur Herman. And it talks about how the US defense industry transformed over a period of 2 years during the period of the World War. That is, in
the Second World War.
Yes, of the Second World War,
right.
Between 1940 to 1942. And there were just two people who made it happen. One was William Knudsen, and the second was Mr. Henry Kaiser. Now, what was the background? William had a background in the steel industry. He was manufacturing steel. So he had some background of how to deal with metals and therefore deal with military equipment. But on the other side, Henry Kaiser was actually a construction engineer, and he was famous for building dams, roads and bridges, big size buildings. That is what he would do. And these two men got together and transformed the defense industry in the United States of America. And whatever you saw coming out between 1940 and 42 was the effort of the industry led by these two people. All the industrialists joined in. They didn't know what they were headed to. But the end, what did we see? We saw tanks rolling out. We saw guns coming out, jeeps and trucks,
Aircraft coming
huge quantities of ammunition. And let me tell you, the B-29 bomber was also unveiled during this very period. So similarly, I think we need to have confidence in our industry, start looking at how they can help us. I would say some strides have been made. Navy for a long time has actually been supporting the shipbuilding industry.
Yes, right.
You can see the way the Air Force is now moving. Air Force is now saying that we need to look at the indigenous aircraft, the LCA Mark 1. They are now looking at inducting a second squadron.
Correct.
And I've also placed orders for 83 more LCAs.
Absolutely.
So I think that is the way forward. And as far as Army is concerned, our Army Design Bureau has now taken shape. We are working very closely with the industry, with the academia. Our own people are interacting with various other think tanks, and we are getting some very positive results from them. We have started small, but I think we should now start pole vaulting and look at bigger issues.
Time has come for complete transformation. I think with the economic situation what it is and the limited budgets that are going to be available, and I think as the Prime Minister has been saying, Make in India should be our mantra. So in that respect, the decision to limit the tenders or competition below 200 crores to Indian products, I think will go a long way in encouraging Indian companies to have a field run or a field day in those that category. So how is that going to work out?
Yes, in fact, the Finance Minister was talking to the media very recently, and she said that this does not mean that imports will stop.
True.
But what we have to do is set certain timelines for various kind of weapons, equipment and other systems that we feel can be manufactured in India. And within these timelines, I think we have to lay down very clear-cut guidelines to our industry, to our defense research and development organization and our ordnance factories, that if you don't come up to the mark within this time frame, well, the industry is on one side also working on the same issues, you are working on the same issues. Whoever comes out with better products will get the deal.
Right.
So I think this will also set in some competition between the ordnance factories and the industry. The Defense Research and Development Organization will also have to, I think, now look at hastening their processes, because anything if they slow down, then the industry is there to grab whatever opportunities available to them. So we have to work very closely with the industry and set the timelines for various kind of things. For example, I would say guns, good progress has been made in the country, and the private industry, the ordnance factories, I think both are moving fairly satisfactory, I would say. And so we can set a timeline to say, okay, within this timeline, we will, after this timeline, we will not accept any imports as far as artillery guns are concerned. Same is the case with ammunition. Large amounts of ammunition are being manufactured by the ordnance factories. We will very soon be allowing the private industry to get into the manufacture of ammunition. The RFIs are already out, in fact, and we are quite confident that this high-end ammunition, which to an extent is being also manufactured by the ordnance factories, but we are also dependent largely on imports. So once this process gets moving, then we'll set a cutoff that after this line or after this period, there will be no such import of this ammunition. And so on and so forth, we will keep moving forward. So wherever we find, the progress is making headway, but I think time has come to give them a cutoff line.
And a very strict cutoff line.
A very strict cutoff line. And I think, this tendency of, saying that we are exceeding PDCs and we need some more time, I think those days are over.
I think so. And I think even that measure about having a project management team and also a finance, a kind of an input from AON to giving the orders, I think the timelines are being squeezed, and I think DMA is working very diligently on that. What is it that you are going to change and hasten the process? How are you working on that?
See, in 2016, we came out with the DPP. Subsequently, this DPP underwent major changes, and repeatedly we were going in for changes in the DPP. So we have decided to make a new DPP, which the Secretary of Defence Production has actually taken out. It is being reviewed by all the stakeholders. And so soon we will have a new DPP, which will actually attempt at condensing all these timelines. Our basic idea is to, whatever process was taking, let us say 6 months, can we telescope that to 3 months? A trial mechanism which was very, very prolonged. Can we have simultaneous trials of equipment with the service and the DGQA, dovetailing their trial procedures? We say we have summer trials and winter trials. Can we carry out trials in such a way that, while the summer trials are happening toward the end of summer and the winter trials happen toward the beginning of winter, so you again telescope those timings. So every process is being hastened up, and the other thing that we are looking at is, when we come out with GSQRs.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
If you have to support the industry and you want things to be made in India, then we have to facilitate them by having GSQRs which are more realistic.
Correct.
So our idea is to say, okay, we will have an acceptable GSQR, which is here, which will accept this, but the desirable is a little higher.
Right.
So while we will attempt to go for better GSQRs, but we will say even if you give us an acceptable GSQR, which will be a shade lower than the desirable, we should be able to induct that equipment and then tell the industry, then we handhold the industry and say we can go in for improvement on the same equipment, ammunition, everything else, weapon systems, and see how we can move forward.
But that's how it works, I think, that you do Mark 1, then do Mark 1A, and then go to Mark 2. The world over, and the American example that you gave, I think it worked like that. So I think it's a very realistic approach that you have adopted. Also, the FDI limit has been raised to 74%. How do you see that panning out? What kind of effect will it have on the Indian defense industry?
Yes, you see, what happens is that we do not have the kind of technology that we may require to go in for complete Indianization of our product. And if we want to completely eradicate imports after some time, then we need technology. Now, to get this technology, you have to obviously increase the foreign direct investment in defense, so that if there are any foreign collaborators who want to either work with our ordnance factories or with our industry, we can invite them. They can set up shop here with nearly 74% FDI being made available to them, which will give them the confidence. And then only thing is that we will also have to support export from that industry, because you see any industry that is going to open base here will be seeking numbers.
Yes.
And upfront they would want to know as to how much will you take, and for how many years are we expected to sustain your products. So we'll have to come out with a framework and a policy which says that, okay, we will be taking this equipment, but it is not guaranteed that we will be sustaining your complete manufacture.
Right.
So while we will take some of your products, but you will also have to.
So simultaneously, this can be an export hub. India can become an export hub.
That's the idea, and actually that is the idea. We are looking at increasing exports in a very big way.
Right.
And we've been given some targets, and I think if we have to achieve that, then this increase in FDI will certainly help.
And also talking about exports, we've done this before. I mean, we have talked about this before. You have attended some of our conferences. That since the Indian military is a sole customer for Indian companies or defense companies, they need to have economies of scale. So in that respect, how will you do the export promotion? I think the defense attaches now posted abroad have got a mandate to promote Indian products.
Yes, very recently this mandate has been given to our defense attaches. They have also been provided some funds for this purpose, in the sense that whatever we are manufacturing here can be exported. So our idea is to remain in contact with them, constantly keep updating them on what is coming through in our country, and that what is it that we can export. Even today we have been exporting a large amount of defense hardware. I think, but we need to move forward on that in a bigger way, and we look forward to our defense attaches actually becoming more proactive in this.
So that's a good step, because now they are clear what they need to do, what is their mandate. But let me move away from just manufacturing, and since your other mandate is also for jointness and integration amongst the three services, and of course the other two agencies that are there, the tri-service agencies that you are handling. You have spoken very early after taking over as CDS about the timelines that you would like to set and then implement that. So a couple of things that you had said in the first months was about creating two tri-service commands. One is the Air Defense Command and maybe a Logistics Command. What's the progress and what are the timelines that now you must have got a better idea of how it is going to progress?
Yeah, we have initiated the process for the Air Defense Command, where the lead agency is the Air Force, the Indian Air Force. And let me tell you, they have made good progress. The first presentation has already been given to our headquarters, that is headquarter IDS. We've recommended some minor amendments because we want all these services to be taken along. Because there's no point coming out with a proposal and then there is, no synergy between the services. So it's better that we move in a synergized manner. But I would say it is making good headway. We are quite satisfied with that. Now, along with that, we decided to also go in for the Maritime Command,
okay,
for which the Navy has been made the lead service. Now, earlier we had said we'll have a Peninsula Command, and then of course people got into semantics and debates on whether we should call it Peninsula or Ocean or Maritime. I think people have to look at the larger game plan. What are we attempting at, rather than getting into the semantics of, terminologies. When we were thinking of a Peninsula Command, we thought, whether we should merge the Andaman and Nicobar Command as part of it. But then, as we gradually moved on, we said, no, if we have to look at a command, Andaman Nicobar Command should also get merged with this command, whatever we are doing. Therefore, you just can't call it Peninsula Command. So, we decided, okay, we'll call it a Maritime Command.
Okay.
So, Navy is the lead agency for that. The terms of reference and the directive have been issued to them and they are working at it.
Okay.
They too are making satisfactory progress. And finally, we are also looking at creating some integrated or joint commands, as you may say, for which the Indian Army is the lead agency.
Okay.
So, you see, we've given a task to the three forces to see, we feel whatever is their field of expertise, let them deal with that. Of course, they have to take the other services along.
Right.
So, you've got an Air Defence Command coming in, you've got the Maritime Command coming in, and work going on also for the integrated or the joint commands.
Right.
Now, with that also, we are looking at, should we not have integrated logistics? We have done some work on this, and we have created some joint logistics hubs in Chennai, in Mumbai and Guwahati.
Okay.
So, these three are, I would say, have almost taken off. In fact, we've made some progress in that. Now, looking at the success of this, we will gradually start expanding and seeing if finally we can amalgamate this entire logistics of the three services and create a logistics command. But some amount of integrated logistics has started happening in, as I said, Chennai, Mumbai and Guwahati.
Right. One of your challenges, if I may be a little upfront about this, would be, and I'm guessing this, would be the trying to change mindsets across all the three services. And it's a very onerous task that you have as the first CDS. What is it that you're going to tell, or you are telling the services that, it's not about turf wars, or it's not about taking control, but it's working together. Are you facing such issues in this process that you are already underway, with the process that is already underway?
I am happy to say, fortunately not.
I see.
The way we had thought that, there will be some kind of reservation among the services. But, what I find is a large amount of the, old veteran community who are of the old thought do come out with some kind of reservations, like I've been hearing about, how are you going to diversify air resources? I read an article where somebody said if you have to go in for Air Defence Command and you've got to go in for these joint commands or integrated commands, then you need 60 squadrons of Air Force. Well, I want to say things have changed. I think this is an old thought process. And I would like to give an example. There was a time when Air Force used to provide air support, close air support to the Army. And in those days, we used to look at air support in terms of numbers. What are the number of sorties that the Air Force will give to the armed forces for any particular operation. So, we used to count air support in terms of sorties. Air Force has changed. Now, when we talk about sorties, we say, why are you asking for sorties? I have now got aircraft which can be multitasked. So, anything which can give you support can also do air defense, can also do fighter operations, can also do electronic warfare operations. So, therefore, don't start counting in terms of sorties. You give us the task that you want and we will accomplish it. And don't ask us what aircraft will come there. Leave it to us how we have to, load that aircraft.
Will know that.
You give us the objective and you tell us what is there. And we will then arm the aircraft, and it could be multitasked. It will also do your task, so it is not dedicated to you. So, what happens if the Air Force has transformed in that way, which we have now accepted that yes, we have to move forward from counting, air support in terms of sorties to task-oriented Air Force air support missions. In the same way, if you have limited number of squadrons, you can always have some squadrons dedicated for air defense, some dedicated to the theatre commands, basically for integration and understanding each other, so that you work together, you train together, and the balance of the squadrons can be kept under the command of a particular service to be made a lot depending on priority. And I would like to give an example of how we deal with artillery.
Right.
We have an infantry division, which is the standard formation of the Indian Army. A division has an artillery brigade.
Sure.
It has finite resources. To say that
Of course.
you have 3 field regiments, 1 medium regiment, at times a light regiment, and a SATA battery. So these are the resources. But is that sufficient to enable the division to execute a task? No. So when a division is given a task, it is given additional resources from other sectors, from other formation, depending on who needs how much of resource. So you have something called units being put on priority call, units being in support, in direct support, and other ways. You have something called superimposed artillery, and that is how reinforcing artillery. So that is how you build up the strength. So I think there is a way in which we can move about things, and I think to say that because of this you will need 60 squadrons is not the best way of looking at it. I think today the air forces, the aircraft are very capable. It is no longer the old machine.
They are multitaskers.
Yes, today we've gone into the 4th generation aircraft are now coming in, and we are heading now to the 5th generation. We are looking at the 5th generation coming in 7 to 10 years from now.
Exactly.
So when you have these kind of aircraft, your capability has increased, and if your capability has increased, your system of war fighting must undergo a change.
Exactly.
At the same time, you have to also look at non-contact warfare.
Sure.
We have to also focus on the cyber, the information, the issue of special forces, how are they going to operate,
Right.
and space. So all these things will now have to be dovetailed into your war fighting
plans.
machinery.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think there is a need. So there will be some kind of centralized control on some assets, but some of the assets will have to be decentralized to the theatre commanders for them to conduct operations. But it does not mean that the theatre commander is going to conduct operations on his own. He will have the support of the other theatres depending on who's executing the main task. Where is the main effort?
And what is the
Yes.
threat?
Where is the main effort?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So you're moving from assets-based forces to capability-based forces, if I may, sort of sum up what you just said. But maybe a couple of final thoughts on this. What are your timelines if you have thought about these first 3 things that you have talked about? Do we expect them to be, say, operational or at least finalized or cleared? The theatre commands that you spoke about, maritime, the air defense, and the logistics command. Do you see them coming up by 2021 or what's the timeline?
Well, the executive instructions for the raising of the Air Defence Command, we are hopeful of issuing the directive by end of this year, and then they start taking shape. And according to me, in 1 or 2 years, the Air Defence Command should be fully functional. Same is the case with the Maritime Command. By maybe early next year, we should be giving them the executive directions. And again, in 1 to 2 years, they should begin to take shape. And as far as the integrated or joint commands are concerned, these again by next year end, I think we should be able to issue the executive directions, and then transformation starts. So our idea is that in the next 2 to 3 years, the directions are issued and the transformation begins to happen.
Correct.
It may take another 2 to 3 years for it to fructify, but I think the process of transformation should start happening.
So we are basically looking at a 5-year window for implementation, let's say. Starts it and then you implement it and then it gets stabilized as we go along. But just one small clarification before I end. You spoke about Andaman Nicobar Command maybe dovetailed into or merged into the Maritime Command. Is that the thought process now instead of Peninsular Command?
Yeah, because when we were talking about the Peninsular Command, it was felt that it has got a very defensive mindset. The Navy and the other supporting agencies must now look at Indian Ocean region as one entity.
Sure.
So if that has to happen, then obviously the Andaman Nicobar Command, which lies within the Indian Ocean region, and we are very fortunate to have this kind of territory which belongs to us in the IOR. It dominates the IOR. So if we are going to look at a maritime command,
right,
then it may become one command, which is which also takes under its wings the Andaman and Nicobar Command.
And you've spoken about also giving role to, I mean, there would be I guess the Northern Theatre Command, Western Theatre Command, all that will come as we go along. But the basic thing here and the final question that I have is about availability of resources or availability of funds. Clearly the budgets are going to be squeezed, as we know. So optimization of resources is something that you would be interested to look at from what we know. So there, how are you working? How are you getting prioritization done?
Firstly, this entire effort of integration, whether you are calling Air Defence Command, the Maritime Command and the Theatre Commands, will in itself lead to some savings, in the sense that rather than working in 3 separate verticals, you will now be working horizontally. So when you work horizontally, you will find that you will be saving a lot on your communication assets, you will be saving a lot on your logistics, a lot of your maintenance systems, because today you have separate maintenance systems because we are working in silos. But when you integrate, so of course savings will come from there. The other thing is, we do understand there will be constraints on budget. But let me tell you one thing, the government has repeatedly told us that as far as your transformation is concerned, we will keep supporting you. We do understand this time because of COVID-19, there could be some pressures, but then we have to learn to live with that. And in the long run, what we are looking at is that we draw a roadmap under the DMA to say what is our requirement over the next 5 years, go to the government, work out the minimum and the maximum, as I said, acceptable and desirable.
Correct.
We work out the bottom line and the top line. Simultaneously with this, a lot of effort is also being made by the Department of Defense, working closely with the Ministry of Finance to see how else can we generate resources. So we are looking at, in some way, monetization of land. In some cases, some other mechanism are being worked out.
Sure.
At the same time, let me tell you, we are also trying to walk the extra mile. We are seeing that can we reduce the pension budget to a limit, pension pay budget,
Sure.
by increasing the ages of retirement.
You mentioned that, yes.
Although the people say these are very baby steps, but let me tell you, in the long run, we have to see what are the savings.
True.
In a particular area, you may say, it is only giving you about 3,000 to 4,000 crores. But gradually, as you move forward, you will find that this thing will, as it begins to take shape, you will start saving some money and adding that to your defense budget. Monetization of land is a very big thing that we are looking at. It will help us in addition to the other issues. So what we are saying is, we are looking at some support from the government and some way where we ourselves are moving forward to generate funds for our ministry.
Internal resources, generation of funds that is happening. I think it's a very challenging task, but with the kind of quick thinking and the planning that you are doing, and the way the DMA is taken off, I think we have very big hope about the 3 services optimizing their resources and then working in a very joint and I would say integrated fashion in coming months and years. Thank you very much, General Rawat, for this very insightful, informative interview, and we'll keep coming back to you maybe 6 months later to ask what's the progress is. But at the moment, thank you very much.
Thank you, Nitin.
Thank you.
Look forward to meeting you again.
Thank you.